I can stand. It's fine. Let's get this stopwatch going. Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction and for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. I can talk about this topic for about 3 or 4 days without a breath. It's pretty passionate to me. There's 3 things I want to talk about. I was asked to also explain what Unscripted's doing around the world in terms of unlocking the social audiences of athletes. We started Unscripted about 4 years ago. The first athlete we started working with was Cristiano Ronaldo. He's got about 300 million followers. He's 6 times bigger than the New York Times, which is the bastion of publishing. But he doesn't see himself as a publisher. He's just an athlete. But the power of Ronaldo is quite extraordinary. But he didn't understand that, and most athletes don't. We've been trialling what that actually means to be an athlete media company. We've got offices in London and New York and Barcelona, and our headquarters are here in Melbourne. We signed up the USA track and field team. We thought we had to make the content for the athletes, and in most cases they don't understand storytelling. In fact, most sports organisations and teams don't understand storytelling. That's what I really want to talk to you about this afternoon. But we signed up the USA track and field team. Oh, great, thank you very much. Before the Rio Olympics, and NBC's the big US broadcaster, big Olympic broadcaster, and they said to us, how the hell are you getting athletes to publish videos so easily? Because they wanted to get athletes to publish, NBC highlights before the Olympics, and they said, we're sending them emails, they don't get them, we send them text messages, they don't read them, we send them Dropbox files, they screw it up in terms of the cut and pasting of the files. And we said, no, we've built a platform, basically an app that sits on the athlete's phone, and we just push videos straight into that app. And they can, press a button, throw some emojis on it, then push it out to the world. And they said, can we use your technology for us? And we said, yeah. And then we thought, yeah. And literally overnight, our entire business changed. I'd like to say it was a strategic brilliance by our part, but it was really a stroke of luck. And literally overnight, we decided to open up our technology to the whole world. So we launched the new platform about 2 months ago at the World Track and Field Championships in London. Mo Farah and Usain Bolt were the first 2 athletes to use our app, and the engagement that track and field had around that event was quite huge in terms of the way that the event organiser could push content to the athletes to push out to their social audiences. And since then it's kind of gone crazy. We've signed up the ATP tennis worldwide, we signed up the World Surf League and all the big brands, Billabong and Quicksilver and so forth. About 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, we signed up the English Football League, which is all 72 teams that sit under the EPL, which we're pretty pumped about. So all our resources have gone to London at the moment. We signed up the Commonwealth Games here in Australia, and we just signed up the AFL as well. We signed up also Netball Australia, so every netballer in Australia has our app on their phone as well. We haven't got to football in Australia, but that's kind of our next priority. And I'm really, really excited about some of the learnings we've had to kind of unlock. It's one thing that every athlete in the world says they want access to, is just great content, whether it's content from Getty Images, which they don't have access to. So we've now unlocked that access of Getty Images for athletes all over the world. I was just looking at Sam Kerr's profile on Getty Images before. Or it could be highlights of games. It could be content from their sponsors, it could be content from their teams, it could be content from the league. They just want access to great content to help them become better storytellers and better publishers. And the one thing that every team wants, or every league, or every broadcaster, or every sponsor, is a better way to unlock the athletes' social audiences. Facebook just released their numbers worldwide of everyone in the world that's on Facebook and Instagram that's engaged in sport, and the numbers are extraordinary. 79% of the world that is engaged in sport on Instagram is following the athlete. Yeah? Only 12% are following the teams, 5% are following the leagues, and 3% are following the media. But 79% are following the athlete. So all power with the athletes. Right? How do you unlock those social audiences? NBA figured this out about 2 years ago, and they've completely changed their whole philosophy and their rules of the organisations, and giving as much content as they possibly can to the athletes. And there's no reason why, that's the reason why they're the #1 in the world in terms of social engagement as a sport today. Whereas the NFL have a very different philosophy, very controlling. We're going to control the content, and it's about trying to get consumers to come to our world rather than pushing content out to their world. Right, so as a consequence, as NFL, they're kind of known as the no fun league at the moment in the US, because of that. So it's quite important. A quick story before I start in terms of the power of storytelling. Back in 2008, I was asked to go on the board of the Homeless World Cup. It was held in Australia, and the final was actually here in Melbourne. And I said no. I said, I just can't do it. I've got a big company. I've got 3 young kids. I sit on 3 other boards. I sit on 3 charities, a ridiculous amount. I just can't do it. And Steve Person was the CEO. He's also the CEO of The Big Issue as well. And he rang me every day, I reckon, for about 3 weeks. And I said no pretty much every time I was telling my PA. And he said, can I just come and see you for 5 minutes? And I go, okay, what's 5 minutes going to do? And so he came in and he just told me one story. And he told me about this Brazilian prostitute who used to come down after a shift and just sit on the basketball courts and the soccer courts and watch all the homeless play street soccer. And they always encourage her to kind of come along and play and so forth. And she said no, and she had all her bling and high heels and so forth. And then one day she took off her heels and decided to play. And she played barefoot. And she was actually really, really good. And they encouraged her to keep on coming back. They actually got her a pair of shoes and so forth, a pair of runners. And she actually made the Homeless World Cup team for Brazil. And that year there was actually a Homeless World Cup, which was actually held in Brazil. And at the final, one of the delegates, one of the FIFA delegates, identified how good she was and actually got her out at the end of that event and actually put her in a training camp for the women's under-23 team, I think, which she made. And then 2 years later, they played in a World Cup, an actual World Cup, which Brazil won. And so she became a world champion. Anyway, the bastard told me this story, and guess what happened? I joined the board of the Homeless World Cup, right? On every rational reason, it made no sense for me to be able to do that. He told me one 5-minute story that had no relevance at all to the subject matter per se, and I said yes. That's the power of storytelling, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. There's kind of 3 themes I want to share with you that if it's understood and implemented, it can fundamentally change your life and certainly create a massive competitive advantage and point of difference in terms of how you show up against your competitive set. Those 3 things are fundamentally what's your purpose? Why do you exist? The second one is, what's the story you're trying to tell? And the buzzword of that is brand positioning. You know, in the hearts and minds of the consumers you want to connect to, how do you want them to feel about themselves? Because great brands don't make you feel good about the brand, they make you feel good about yourself. So how do you want people to feel about themselves as a consequence of how you show up in the world? And the third one is just, what's the best way to tell your story? And typically there's only 3 ways you can tell your story. It's product, services, you know, your culture, your DNA, how you treat people. That's my favourite because it doesn't cost anything typically. It's just an attitude, if you like. And communications. They're typically the 3 ways. So they're fundamentally the 3 questions that anyone in the room needs to answer. Right? What's your purpose? What's your story? And what's the best way to tell it? The first one is really about, why do you exist? You're just here to show up and make a truckload of money and win some games, or fundamentally you stand for something, you care for something, you know, you believe in something. Understanding what that is really, really, really important. Everyone in the room lives and dies on the success of 3 things: how we think, what we prioritise, and the choices that we make. And if you can challenge how you think and think differently, then you'll prioritise other things and you'll make different decisions and choices. You know, Toyota doesn't exist to make cars, that's something that it does. Yeah, it exists for emissions and omissions, that's its purpose. You know, 0 carbon dioxide and zero car accidents, that's their why. I spent most of my life working at Nike overseas. Our purpose was to bring innovation and inspiration to every athlete in the world. And if you've got a body, you're an athlete. You know, so we didn't compete on the rational, we competed on the why. If you really think hard about why you exist, fundamentally why you exist, it is extraordinary how it can open up your eyes and create extraordinary change. You know, the biggest 3 issues in the workforce today are nostalgia, denial, and arrogance. The 3 biggest requirements in the workforce today is innovation, optimisation, and customer service. Right? The great thing about that is that's just a mindset thing. It's just fundamentally how we think. Yeah? It's really important as it relates to your consumers, and I'll talk about vulnerability and connection and shame a bit later on. But every generation has its challenges. Yeah? In the 1960s it was conformity, in the 1980s it was materialism, and today it's depth of meaning. Where am I going? You know, where are we going? So huge advantage if you understand those insights and you understand how your purpose can connect into those. About 7 years ago, or probably a bit longer, the Prime Minister, or the ex-Prime Minister, asked us this classic Dorothy Dix question. He said, "Ben, what's the objective of sport?" right? And we were just kicking off what was to be known as the Crawford Report. It's effectively a quasi-sports policy for Australia, if you can believe that. We spent billions of dollars. We actually didn't have a collective point of view on the way the money should be spent. And we were in charge of the 5th chapter of that report, which is around the sustainability of the sports ecosystem and the commercialisation of sport, because most sports organisations, certainly Olympic sports organisations, were relatively bankrupt, if you like, non-profit organisations and so forth. And anyway, so he asked us this classic Dorothy Dix, what's the objective of sport? And kind of been asked that question before, and we said, well, through the answer, we said, well, sport's not an objective. The objective, if you want an objective, is kind of, jingoistic elite, jingoism, elite patriotism in terms of the country, from elite performance, the Socceroos, the Matildas and so forth. Yeah, in terms of the national pride that you get from that. But it's also an outlet for youth versus, say, obesity. We might win a few extra medals at the London Olympics, but we're still one of the fattest nations on earth. What's with that, in terms of the correlation or the objective? Or for youth culture, because the stats around a 16, 17-year-old boy or girl that's involved in highly organised sport is like a 92% less likely chance of getting involved in serious drugs and alcohol. And we said they're the objectives, but sport's not an objective, and sports organisations don't have a God-given right to exist. They exist to serve the community as they define against those objectives, how you define the community, right? And this is not isolated to Australia. The whole world is thinking about these things somewhat differently, right? And so I said to the Board of Cycling Australia throughout this kind of the Crawford Report, I said, why did the South Australian Tourism Commission create the Tour Down Under and bring, at the time, really bad example now, Lance Armstrong out to Australia and create this event that was syndicated to 79 countries, great sponsorship, great crowds. And you guys, Cycling Australia, you're the parents, if you like, of the sport. You don't own it, you don't sanction it, you don't make $1 from this sport, and you're bankrupt as a sport today. And the chairman got up and smashed his hand on the boardroom table because we didn't effing think about it. And that's the point. How you think determines what you prioritise, and that determines the choices that you make, and we're all the same. But if we can challenge ourselves to think differently, you'll prioritise other things. And you work in the entertainment economy, right? By definition of working in sport, you work in the entertainment economy. By definition of that, you work in the storytelling economy, and whoever tells the best story wins. Athletics Australia told us the same thing. They said their raison d'etre, I'll never forget it, Eddie Maguire, was that he said, the reason we exist is for elite performance. And we go, that's fine, but you're going to be bankrupt for the rest of your life. You don't own elite performance. You don't own the Olympic Games or the Commonwealth Games or the World Championships. Imagine having a business that you can't actually commercialise your core product. Meanwhile, over here, in kind of social, lifestyle, recreation, there's so much money to be made. All right, in terms of community and lifestyle and recreation, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, triathlons, those kind of things. Where all the entrepreneurs, the right-brainers, the innovators, had been thinking that way. And we were kind of caught in this institutionalised, one-dimensional way of thinking. So Apple Computers is more of an athletic company than Athletics Australia is. Because Apple Computers are thinking about how you want to go and do exercise and run around botanical gardens, you want to listen to music or count your calories or something like that, right? They're thinking that way. They're thinking about you as a holistic person, not just pigeonholing you in a certain way. And if you think holistically about your target market, you'll create phenomenal opportunity. But it's a quirky process because it typically involves not focusing on the sport. It's drawing out the story behind the sport and making a connection on a human level, not on a sporting level. So the fundamental question I'd probably ask the room, do we need to think differently about why we exist, right? And then what we're prioritising and then the choices that you're making. In terms of what's the story to be told, as I said, there's no rational reason anyone in the room loves their favourite song, their favourite movie, their favourite football team. It's an irrational or emotional connection we have with the product. Yeah? And the way to understand that irrational motivation is to understand passion, and it's through storytelling. And you want to know the difference between information and story? Information is the king died and then the queen died. Story is the king died and then the queen died of a broken heart. And just by adding those 4 words to the end of that sentence, I've transferred information or data into story. It's kind of data with a soul. Without even realising it, you conjured up all these emotions, right, in terms of the love for each other. They had all the power in the world, but they couldn't live without the love for each other. That's the power of story. It's incredibly powerful if you understand the principles of storytelling. And every industry has certain principles of storytelling. And that's some of the elements that I want to take you through again. If you want to know why movies is the #1 form of entertainment in the world, they tell the best. They tell the best stories. That's exactly right. It's the reason why UFC is the fastest growing sport in the world. I hate this sport with a passion. but I respect the sport in terms of the storytelling, the way they build up the characters in reality TV, and the way you understand their backstory before they even enter the octagon. They've got a very powerful purpose, and they've got a very powerful grassroots strategy, and they've got a very, very cause related around bullying and so forth, and their values around discipline and fitness and respect and so forth. You wouldn't expect those kind of values as regards to it, but they've developed a very powerful purpose, strong values, and they're a very, very good storytelling organisation. And video games is the same, but in any industry in the world, whether it's education or religion, if it's the Quran or the Bible, if you read them, they're just magnificent stories that kind of give you context of how to live your life. It's the way in certain countries in Asia, they're over-indexing in terms of performance is because the way they're learning is through story. In certain Western countries, we're learning permutations and combinations and trying to memorise sort of things. So, but the world is changing, and there's kind of two things that are kind of sabotaging our ability to tell good stories. First of all, we're living through this information revolution that the world has never seen before. The first one is fear. There's all these macro fears in the world today: global warming, terrorism, GFC, breakdown of religion, natural disasters, tsunamis, breakdown of the family, and this materialistic world that we're living through, that we've got to buy something to make us feel good about ourselves. And it works for a few days or a week or so forth, and then it kind of doesn't work anymore. We're kind of grasping for so forth, and especially in terms of our identity. And the second one is, I just love this quote: "Not a shred of evidence exists in favour of the idea that life is serious." If you want to be a successful organisation, get childlike, get playful, have fun with it. It's called a game. Games based on principles of play. Play with it. If you're a coach, absolutely go this way. The world has got way too serious because of the information revolution and because of fear. There's so much, we're living through an information revolution the world has never seen before, driven by technology and the internet. So there's so much data and big data, and there's reports and emails and meetings. You know, I ask anyone in the world how they feel, and they'll say they feel busy. That's how we're feeling. We're feeling busy. So you kind of got to rebel against these kind of macro trends to bring back time to get good at storytelling. Now I'll just play you this quick video, and then I'll explain the principles behind it as it relates to compelling storytelling.
The time may have come to say goodbye to Muhammad Ali, because very honestly, I don't think he can beat George Foreman.
Howard Cosell, you told everybody I don't have a chance. You told them I don't have nothing but a prayer. Well, chump, all I need is a prayer, because if that prayer reached the right man, not only will George Foreman fall, but mountains will fall.
Maybe he can pull off a miracle. But against George Foreman, so young, so strong, so fearless, against George Foreman, who does away with his opponents one after another in less than 3 rounds, it's hard for me to conjure with that.
That once did no damage, that one did. 2 wild right hands taken on the side of the head of Muhammad Ali. There's a real strong right hand just underneath the heart. And Muhammad Ali is taking some punishment now. About 8 seconds left in the round.
Bell rang. Ali went back to the corner. He finally, the nightmare he'd been awaiting in the ring had finally come to visit him. He was in the ring with a man he could not dominate, who was stronger than him, who was not afraid of him, who was going to try to knock him out, and who punched harder than Ali could punch. And this man was determined and unstoppable. And Ali had a look on his face that I'll never forget. It's the only time I ever saw fear in Ali's eyes. Ali looked as if he looked into himself and said, all right, this is the moment. This is what you've been waiting for. This is that hour. And do you have the guts? And he kind of nodded to himself like, you got to get it together, boy. You really got to get it together. And you are going to get it together. You will get it together. He nodded some more, looking as if he were looking into his the eyes of his maker. And Ali swung like a man in the rigging. He'd go all the way back. He'd slide out. He'd come in and out of it like that. And occasionally he'd get hit. He'd say, George, you disappoint me. You don't hit as hard as I thought you would. George, you're not hitting hard enough. You're not breaking popcorn, George. You're just not hitting. And Foreman was insane with rage. And whanging at him and whanging at him and whanging at him. Powerful, powerful, powerful.
Muhammad Ali, he was like a sleeping elephant. You can do whatever you want around a sleeping elephant, whatever you want. But when he wakes up, he tramples everything.
Left the combination by Ali, lands in the head of Foreman. Foreman with that right. Ali, Foreman, good pass, a good right, backs up Foreman, backs him up in his back. Foreman standing up, Foreman backs up, Ali, Foreman hit again. Foreman has been hit 3 or 4 times.
Suddenly, Muhammad Ali came off the ropes and he hit him a right. And you could see the sweat just pour off. So I then turned to Norman, I remember, and he must have been somewhat puzzled, but I said, "The succubus has got him," referring back to this woman with the trembling hands that I'd been told by the witch doctors were going to touch Foreman and destroy him.
The tactics of Ali to let the man punch himself out. 30 seconds left in round 8. Very even fight. Ali, a sneaky right hand. Another sneaky right hand. This time he works over the shoulder of Foreman. It's a combination. 3, 4, 5, 6. Foreman gets up to the knee. 8. That's it. The fight is stopped. Muhammad Ali, a dramatic 8-round knockout. He knocks out George Foreman.
He did it. He's champion again.
Okay, the reason I showed you a boxing video at a women's in football conference, you may be wondering. I'm not a boxing fan either. I was a fan of that story, if you like. It made a connection with me. When it launched, it was the biggest trending sports documentary on the planet. And the reason it had nothing to do with boxing. It had to do with the story behind the story. So I want you to remember for the rest of your life, relevant versus compelling storytelling. Okay, if boxing is relevant, if you like boxing, it's relevant to you, right? You've grown up with it, right? You'll be interested in it. But if you do not like boxing, I can make you like boxing by creating compelling storytelling, where I go behind the scenes and draw out the story behind the story and make a connection with you on a human level, not on a boxing level. That is the power of compelling storytelling. And once you understand that, you look at your world very, very differently, and the opportunity becomes much larger than how you initially thought it was. And through the use of analogy and metaphor and going behind the scenes, and you heard childlike storytelling themes like witch doctors and sleeping elephants and moving mountains and so forth through that narrative then. That's compelling storytelling. That has nothing to do with boxing. And all over the world, the sports that are doing it the best, the teams, the football teams that are doing it the best, make a connection on a human level, not on a football level. So entertainment-wise, who's doing it the best in the world at the moment? Probably reality TV. Okay, reality TV shows are kicking sports ass, driving me nuts. They understand the principles of compelling storytelling, and they go behind the scenes and draw out the story behind the story. So we don't love cooking as a country, right? But we do love My Kitchen Rules or MasterChef. And why? It's because they go behind the scenes and draw out the story, and you make a connection with one of the protagonists, the young mum overcoming cancer, and what it means to her and so forth. And you make a choice, an irrational emotional choice. You make a connection with one of those individuals, and it draws you in. And then the food comes after that. Yeah? When Wild Water Sports was created in North America in the 1960s, they literally just went behind the scenes and drew out the story behind the story, and created a whole new generation of sports fans across North America, mainly women, who had no interest in baseball or football, but they were fascinated by the backstory. You know, the against the odds romance, the African American getting out of the ghettos or overcoming cancer, or his relationship with his mum. And it was on that level that drew this generation of sports fans in. Right? It wasn't sport, it was human connection. That is the opportunity for football in Australia, and particularly women's football in Australia as well, all over the world. Yeah? As humans, we're hardwired for connection. It's why we're here. It's why we exist. It's why we're on this planet, to connect. Yeah? Shame, by definition, is the fear of disconnection. I'm not worthy of being connected to you, okay, because I feel I'm not strong enough or rich enough or good-looking enough or fit enough. I don't have enough friends. Right? This scarcity mentality which the whole world is kind of getting caught up in. It's just driving this never enough element, creating these elements of shame. Coupled with that, you've got the perfection myth. We all think we have to have the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect car, the perfect house. You don't have a perfect relationship, we have the perfect divorce. But we have to have this kind of perfection kind of thing, and it's crap, right? We're imperfect and we're full of struggle, but we're worthy. Now, I can connect to whoever understands me, I'll try and connect with them. If you understand your target market and what their fears are, and what their vulnerabilities are, and you lean into it and you tell that story, extraordinary amount of opportunity. And I could go on for days in terms of case studies of brands and sports teams that understand that connection, understand what it means to truly connect with someone on a human level. Yes, obviously you've got a product, whether it's Grassroots or a pathway program or an elite performance program like tonight. You still have to have a product, obviously, in terms of the promise that you're making. But understanding connection is really, really, really powerful. Whether you're trying to connect with consumers or you're trying to connect with participants at primary school level, pathway level, or elite at level, it's the same issue. It's extraordinarily lack of understanding around authenticity, vulnerability, connection, and storytelling. There's a huge overlap between the three. I just wanted to share with you the success formula. Really powerful for storytelling, and a lot of very successful brands around the world use it, and quite a few big sports teams use it as well. Success stands for simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. Yeah, it's an acronym. There's only one S on this success formula. But it's the first two are pretty important to me, simple and unexpected. Can you let me know when I'm at time or overtime or so forth? Have I got 17 minutes to go? Great, okay, that's good. Thank you, it's a very big clock. Simple and unexpected, but the U is really important here, unexpected. You need to disrupt people and you need to disrupt in their mind their perspective of you, their perception of you. There's so much noise and clutter today. If you're playing an awareness game versus an engagement game or exposure versus impact, you need to disrupt me in media or on social media or in terms of whatever abilities I have to reach you. You need to create an unexpected relationship. You need to stop my brain in some way, shape or form. Really, really, really important. I helped friends of mine set up this charity about 14, 15 years ago called Movember. Yeah? It is now the fastest growing charity in the world. And when I was working at Nike, I did a lot of work with Livestrong. Yeah? And we turn over like $96 million a year. These guys turn over $156 million in 1 month, right? Now, coming into the market with 875,000 non-for-profits in Australia alone, and most of them are telling a certain message, whether it's UNICEF and World Vision and so forth. And it's an irrational connection you have with charities and so forth. And they just chose to tell a different story. They started to have fun with it and play with it and very childlike. And the concept of growing a Mexican porn stash in the month of November and seeing whose mustache is worse than others is ridiculous. It's totally irrational. It makes no sense on a rational level, right? And yet it's the fastest growing charity on the planet. What's with that? Yeah? You kind of think, well, why is that? That's the power of storytelling. Yeah? Make that connection and make it disruptive. Coca-Cola are probably the best in the world at storytelling, but they don't exist at the basic level. They don't exist to sell carbonated water with a bit of caffeine and sugar in it. They exist to sell happiness in a bottle, optimism. That's their story. And if you go on YouTube and you look at any Coca-Cola ad from the 1960s onwards, that's what they're selling, happiness in a bottle. And that's why Pepsi will never catch Coca-Cola. Right? Not because their product's any worse. They win every single blind taste test in the world. Can you believe that? Every single one. But they can't catch Coke. Why? Because Coke's telling a better story in an irrational, emotional way. Because Pepsi's selling fresh, these guys are selling joy and optimism. And in terms of how we're feeling at the moment in the world, which one do you want to feel between those two? It's crazy. It's absolutely ludicrous, but that's also the opportunity. Harley Davidson aren't selling motorcycles. They're selling rebelliousness in that kind of attitude. In terms of storytelling formulas, I'm going to skip over a lot of this in the interest of time, but just so you know, there's 3 storytelling formulas that make up about 98% of all Hollywood blockbusters. I don't want to turn you into a nerd when you're watching TV tonight, but they're against the odds romance, which is also called the connection plot, overcoming a relationship chasm. And I'll skip over this. There's the anti-establishment hero, and there is the problem solver. Okay, you can apply these 3 storytelling themes to your own organisation, to your own team or your own brand, even from a government perspective as well. Again, music has formulas and sport has formulas. And the sport formula is based on heroes and rivalries. A hero creates another hero, they create a rivalry, but that's not it. That'll create a relevant consequence, but I'm interested in the compelling consequences in terms of the opportunity, particular for women's sport and women's football. Brands have the same issue. The 4 biggest sponsors in the world, categories, telcos, insurances, automotives and banks. None of them have a legitimate reason to be on the field of play because they're a bank, right? So they have to create the fit. They have to create the glue, the story. And typically they go behind the scenes and draw out the story behind the story to create that fit. Because on a rational level, they're a bank or they're a car company. They don't have a right to be there. But if they can create a fit, right? And there's if we've got time, there's a beautiful case study for P&G, became the official sponsor of Mums, and their campaign was extraordinary. They had no reason to be on the field of play, but they found one, they created one. So if you're trying to bring sponsors into your sport, and they don't have a legitimate reason to be there because they're a telco or an insurance company or an automotive, a bank or a dry cleaning and so forth, find the fit, find the narrative, find the story between why you exist and what the opportunities are in terms of the story that they're trying to tell. You will unlock value. And that's the future of sponsorship worldwide, is working out what's the story they're trying to tell and create that engagement, because most brands don't need more awareness. In terms of the best way to tell your story, I mentioned this earlier, connection, vulnerability and storytelling are the 3 greatest needs of our time. If you can work out basically from your purpose how you can connect and what the needs are of your target market, the number 1 fear for men in the world is looking weak. You now know that. The number 1 fear for women is body image. You now know that. Okay, what can you work with that? How can you overcome that? Some of the storytelling we've been working with athletes all over the world that have had incredible success has nothing to do with their sport. This is Carissa Moore. She's 3 world-time surf champion. She surfed the biggest waves on the planet. This was her most successful video that she did on social media last year.
If I was to go back in time and to talk to my younger self, I would just tell myself that I was beautiful no matter what, and not to compare myself to what other people look like. I really struggled with body image growing up, and I spent a lot of time looking at myself in the mirror and always comparing myself to the girls around me, and I've really learned that everyone has something beautiful and unique about them, and just to embrace who you are, and confidence is the most beautiful thing.
Really, really simple storytelling. The Green Bay Packers, one of the most successful commercial team franchises in the world, okay? Their connection, the reason they exist, is around community, in particular the working class, in particular the cheese factories. They call themselves the cheeseheads. Hundreds of millions of dollars, people come from all over the world to buy that cheese head, right? They're not selling NFL, they're selling cheese, yeah? I know, believe me, it makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense if you understand connection. The Portland Timbers, one of the new teams that came in the soccer league in the US, who sell out every pre-match simply by connecting to their community, which is where I lived for many years, which is Portland, Oregon wood, right? They're selling wood, in particular Oregon wood, and they have the old wood chopping competitions and all those kind of things. But the connection it has with that community is quite extraordinary. Find out what connects your team or your league or your community. That's where the gold is. That's the magic. And sometimes it's the imperfections. Don't look for perfection. Find the funny stuff, the imperfect stuff. I'll skip over some of these stats. Sports are already doing this in Australia, by the way. Netball, I've given all the rights back to the athletes. So every netballer gets access to Getty Images, they get access to highlights from games from Telstra, and pushing it out on social media to promote the Suncorp Super Netball. AFL started last week with the International Rules Series, pushing out content to all the athletes and with links straight through to ticket sales. The Commonwealth Games started this week with their athletes to unlock ticket sales for their sports. So you think about it, right? 79% of the world are following the athletes, and you've got big followings. And if you can unlock that, that's extraordinary free media and phenomenal reach. And that's where the engagement is clearly, right? As long as you can give their athletes quality content that they want to share, then typically they'll want to help the sport as well. That's the big insight. Obviously, there's Ronaldos of the world who are probably on a slightly different level. But in most cases, and in particular, the reason why females over-index in social media is because they're more social, more open, more engaged. That's a competitive advantage. You can leverage the hell out of that in terms of connection and storytelling. But often athletes don't know why they exist, sounds quirky, but also what their story is. I get told from all over the world I don't have any stories because they believe they have to create the best version of themselves, which is creating all these mental health issues all over the world on social media. Because you start to compare yourself. You go on social media and you see your friends, you know, everyone doing the same thing, that kind of narcissistic best version of myself, and you start to compare and go, geez, maybe I don't have that many friends and so forth. As opposed to understanding that it's a platform to explain or launch the best vision for yourself. It doesn't have to be about you. It just can be things that are important to you. That could be a young child. That could be a fan. It could be a teammate that's just overcome injury to play its first game. It could be a relationship with your mum. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's the best vision for the kind of person you want to be. Once you understand that and you can provide content to your athletes, simple stuff, could be gifts, doesn't have to be video all the time. It could be just interesting articles. We're seeing huge growth of athletes' profiles. We worked with Trent Cotchin, who's an AFL footballer here, who at the start of the year didn't even have a Facebook account. He didn't feel worthy, he had shame coming out of his ears, didn't feel worthy to be a great footballer, let alone the captain of an AFL team. By helping him understand he's imperfect and he's full of struggle and he's a bit shit scared and emotional and doesn't have all the answers like all of us, but he is worthy. He's worthy of love, he's worthy of connection, he's worthy of going on a journey. Once he realised that, oh my God, the stories that kind of came out of him, and nothing about him, but just things they were really passionate about. Fast forward to the end of this year, okay? Now he's the #1, get this, he's the #1 athlete in Australia in terms of engagement on social media. Not the #1 football, the #1 athlete, yeah? Not only that, his relationships with his friends, with his family, with his wife, and guess what else happened? They played pretty good football. He actually won the premiership, and he's a premiership coach now, premiership captain now. That's the power of truly embracing vulnerability, truly embracing authenticity, understanding connection, right? Having some self-compassion for yourself and then working out the stories. It's really, really, really important that you understand that and just explore that. And there's some brilliant, rich material in terms of understanding these themes as well. When I was at Nike, we watched the huge phenomenon of women's football in women's soccer in the US. And I had the great pleasure of working with Mia Hamm for a bit. And I loved coming up with taking her quotes and seeing how far we can take her quotes. This is actually Andre Agassi's favourite quote. Andre Agassi is our biggest investor, and I don't know if any one of you has read the book Open, his autobiography, but when it launched, it sold 7 to 1. It's now the biggest selling sports story ever written, right? It still sells 3 to 1 today. And you kind of think about that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because tennis is not the biggest sport in the world, clearly, and he's not the biggest athlete in the world. So why is his book the most popular story in the world? It's because he called it Open for a start, and he said if you really want to connect with the world, you have to show up imperfections, real, rawness, everything. As he said openly, he had more to lose than gain by writing Open, but he really wanted to connect, right? Vulnerability is it all. And it made an incredibly powerful human connection, not a tennis connection, a human connection. I've only got 6 minutes left, so I might either throw it out to questions, because as you can tell, I'll keep talking about this for the next few days. I'll tell you what, I'll finish with just 2 interesting videos that I thought had a pretty nice approach, more so from the insights that they unlocked to make a connection. And sorry if this is a Nike ad.
Yes, middle seat's open.
They look so non-judgmental. I don't trust that.
No shame in running half a half marathon. 2 miles? Oh, good. A bunch of models right in front of me.
Okay, yoga. Changed my life.
And focus on something else. Why are there so many mirrors?
Don't mind me over here with my little baby weights, baby arms.
What am I even doing? This is actually weirdly motivating. I love running. It's really fun. Exercise reduces stress.
Steady.
I got this.
Ugh, I can't.
Almost there.
I can't.
Breathe.
I can't.
I did it. Let's go again.
And the last one, I'll just play you this one really quick. Have you played this?
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give you some actions to do. And just do the first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair. Oh my God.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aw.
My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So do you think you just insulted your sister?
No. I mean, yeah, insulted girls, but not my sister.
Is like a girl a good thing?
Actually, I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing. It sounds like you're trying to humiliate someone.
So when they're in that vulnerable time between 10 and 12, how do you think it affects them when somebody uses like a girl as an insult?
I think it definitely drops their self-confidence and really puts them down, because during that time they're already trying to figure themselves out, and when somebody says you hit like a girl, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because they think they're a strong person. It's kind of like telling them that they're weak and they're not as good as them.
And what advice do you have to young girls who are told they run like a girl, kick like a girl, hit like a girl, swing like a girl?
Keep doing it, because it's working. If somebody else says that running like a girl or kicking like a girl or shooting like a girl is something that you shouldn't be doing, that's their problem. Because if you're still scoring and you're still getting to the ball on time and you're still being first, you're doing it right. It doesn't matter what they say. I mean, yes, I kick like a girl and I swim like a girl and I walk like a girl and I wake up in the morning like a girl because I am a girl. And that's not something that I should be ashamed of. So I'm gonna do it anyway. That's what they should do.
If I asked you to run like a girl now, would you do it differently?
I would run like myself.
Would you like a chance to redo it?
Yeah.
Why can't run like a girl also mean win the race?
Cool. I've only got about 4 minutes left, so I might happy to go over, or sorry, happy to take questions, or.
I think we've got time for a couple of questions. Helen, I know you're absolutely gagging to ask one. Go on. You can go first.
Does this work? Yeah. I recently read an article that said you single-handedly won Richmond FC the premiership this year. Tell us how you did that, and what can these clubs take away and do at their grassroots clubs?
Yep. So I didn't. I did think I was a pretty good left foot kick, but it was all and it's all credit to Richmond. Is that everything that did? Is there any coaches in the room or teams in the room? Everything that team did this year was counterintuitive. They went childlike, where the world's got very serious with information and data. They started telling stories. But more importantly, the leadership, and that's why I wanted to play those last 2 videos, is once you realise that the world's caught up in this perfection myth and this scarcity mentality that you're not something enough, not good enough, not rich enough, not whatever enough, and you unlock that, and you actually say to the world, I'm imperfect and I'm full of struggle, but I'm worthy. And if the parents say that to their kids, if the coaches say that to the players, it is extraordinary, because it creates safety and permission for others to then, oh, thank God someone said it, because I'm feeling imperfect, but I didn't realise that I can be worthy and imperfect at the same time. That's what Richmond did this year. It had nothing to do with football. Had everything to do with, and everyone, it's been well documented, the connection that they made amongst each other, the stories that they shared. As I mentioned earlier, the number one fear for men in the world is looking weak. When you deliberately go out there and put yourself out there and share your weaknesses and your vulnerabilities, it's, you know, it looks like courage, but it feels like fear. And the word courage, the actual definition of the word courage, cur, comes from the Latin word that means heart. And the initial definition of courage was to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. And that's what the coaches and the captains did. And they told that story, and the connection that that made, and it kind of unlocked this extraordinary relationship that, yeah, I was shocked. It actually worked, yeah. So it was pretty cool.
I think we've got one more up the back.
Yeah.
Sorry, microphone coming your way. Hang on.
That's not Sue Crowe, is it?
Yeah, it is Ben Crowe.
Hello, Sue Crowe. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering what work you do with athletes around the haters and the keyboard warriors, because this storytelling stuff's fantastic. But
Yep, absolutely. What we do with athletes is helping them understand, well, quite a few things. First of all, if you're an elite athlete or an elite coach and you walk out the door here, it's not real. It's the same as Mickey Mouse walking out the door. Right? It's not actually real. It's the identity of who you are. It's not who you are. It's the persona, not the person. So once athletes realise that and the rules of engagement, they realise that it's not personal and it's not real. When something writes about someone in the media or in the social media, they're attacking the identity. It'd be like them attacking Mickey Mouse. Right? It's not the person. It's not who they are. But because often they think they don't distinguish between the person and the persona, they start to go, oh, that person really hates me. Right? So understanding the rules of engagement of the media-driven industry that they're in is really, really important. Understanding how to block things on social media is also really important. So you can block words, you can block people, you can only get comments, you can block slang, you can block shit, whatever the word is, right? You can block that completely from your world, so you only get certain feedback from friends or feedback that gets certain things. So there's certain things you can use your social media tools to protect yourself in terms of the environment to some degree. And then the third one is really helping them understand that social media wasn't designed to show the best, the best version of yourself, because that just creates this kind of narcissistic society. But it's an incredible platform to tell a story or share a message that's important to you in terms of your vision. So helping athletes work out what's their purpose, why do they exist, you know, how do they want to be remembered at their funeral. Rather than resume virtues, we kind of work with eulogy virtues. You know, what's really, really important? Are they just here to show up and make a shitload of money and win some games of sport, or do they care for something? They stand for something. So helping athletes understand that opportunity they've got, almost an obligation that they've got to connect with the world in some way, will create much, much better role models, because, as you saw by the numbers, they over-index on every social platform in the world. But at the moment, you know, Ronaldo's very bad at it. Like he's very good at taking his shirt off, right, and showing you his abs, but he's very bad at storytelling. And he's the biggest athlete on the planet, so hence lies the opportunity, if you like, so to educate athletes on some of these things that there's no such thing as fame school where you can learn to be famous. So it's kind of, education is a huge part of what we do with athletes and teams.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Crowe.
Thanks, mate.